Hello all and welcome to our Unit 1B CDA study guide. We have 10 questions today. The last time I did a study guide, it was about 35 minutes long and that was too long. So we're going to try and go even faster for this one. So let's get started. This first question is asking what percent is represented by the shaded part of the figure. Now, I will be the first to tell you that these are annoying when they're like this. However, we can go ahead and count the groups of 4, the 2 by 2 groups, and then the groups by 1 afterwards. So I'm going to count how many groups of 4 there are. There's 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 groups of 4. And 9 times 4 gets me 36. And then the number of singular boxes, there's 1 right here, 1 right here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm not marking these off well, but I don't need to make it perfect, right? So I know there were 9 groups of 4, and then there was 12 individual ones. Ooh, I don't like that color. Let me use a different color. 36 plus 12 is going to be 48. Now, since I know this grid is 10 by 10, all of these grids are in this kind of problem, then I know that it's 100 total options, right? I don't have to count the ones that are blank. So 48 out of 100 is 48%. Now, the big thing here when I look at these answers is even if I somehow forgot this, I know that A is wrong because it's not that small. It's closer to half. And it can't be 400% because I can't shade a square more than once, right? That would say 400% is like saying I shaded everything 4 times. That's crazy. So the answer is B. All right, for number 2, we're reading that in a survey, students were asked their favorite subject. The results are shown in the table below. Now in that table, we see that 12 students liked science, 10 liked math, 20 liked reading, and 8 liked history. This is just wrong. Only 10 liked math? I see you 10 people. Thank you. Now, what percent of students chose reading as their favorite subject? Well, we know a percent can also be represented as a part divided by the whole. Now, the part on this is very easy because reading is given. It's 20. So 20 is my part. And then if I divide that by my whole, I'll get my answer. However, I don't have my whole here. You can actually You can calculate the whole by adding up all of the values of students' favorite subjects, right? So if I add all of these up, I know that 12 plus 8 is 20, and that 10 and 20 is 50, or 30. What am I saying? I'm adding in my head. 10 plus 20 is 30, and then 20 plus 30 is 50. So 20 divided by 50 gets me my answer. When I do that, I get 0.4 if I were to do it in my calculator. Now, 0.4 isn't an answer, but I also need to remember that I need to move my decimal point over 2 times, which turns 0.4 into 40%, which is C. For question 3, we read, at a middle school, 74 students have freckles. There are 258 students in the school. To the nearest tenth of a percent, what percent of the students have freckles? Now this gives us what we're looking for, right? We know we need to do our part divided by our whole, just like the last one. And when I see this, I am not going to be dividing this by hand. We have a calculator for a reason. In the real world, I would not divide this by hand. I'm not going to divide it by hand here. 74 divided by 258. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't even have like the answer. I can't even do this one in my head. So I pulled my calculator on my phone out, which you should use the Desmos calculator. And when I calculate my answer, I get that 74 divided by 258 is 0.2868. Now, when I round to the nearest tenth, let's go ahead and talk about that really quickly. I need to I need to round the percent to the nearest tenth. So I need to first turn this into a percent, right? So to do that, my decimal point, which was right here, needs to move over 1 and 2, and I get 28.68%. Whoa, that 8 was a little crazy there, folks. 28.68%. And that's not it because it's not there. However, we can calculate our answer based on this being multiple choice. These are still good to know how to round. So we will round briefly. I need to round to the nearest tenth. So first I identify my tenth and then I say, is this 8 going to cause it to go up or stay the same? Well, I heard once from a student last year and it stuck with me, 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. If the value in this box, in the place value after the number we are rounding to, is 5 or more, so here it's 8 because it's 0.68, then we raise the value of the number we're rounding to up 1. And that makes sense because 68 is a lot closer to 70 than it is to 60. So 28.6 would actually be further away than 28.7, which is why that is our answer. Awesome. Next one. Oh, B, duh. All right, for question 4, 20 people are members of a local bowling club. 8 of them are men. What percentage of the bowling team are women? Now, this is a great question because it mixes you up. It's still asking us to calculate a percent from a part in a whole. So common that we will do this, even in the real world. What I would suggest is using some tools to underline what's important. 20 people, maybe even to rewrite it so it says 20 right here. Pardon the radio in the background. 20 total people. And then I notice that we have 8 men. 8 men. So if there are 8 men, how many women are there? You should be able to subtract and realize there are a total of 12 women. Okay, now when I see this, I now know that the percentage of the bowling team that is women is 12 over 20. When I do 12 divided by 20 in my Desmos calculator, I get 60%. Now, please make sure that you're checking to see what percentage it's asking for. What is the question really asking for? It would be so easy to do just 8 over 20 on this problem. So please take your time, slow down. 10 questions means you have enough time to answer all of them if you've done the work beforehand. All right, our first question that asks for a percent of a number. Don't be scared by this one. If you know that Desmos calculator trick, you can use that here. But if you do not, then what we can do is just multiply by first converting this percent into a decimal. So 30%, my decimal would be right here in the percentage, and I would need to move it over 2 times to be right here. Oh, my little arrow wasn't very good there. There we go. Move it over 2 times and I get 0.30. Oh my goodness, my mouse decided to break. 0.30, and I would times 150 by that. Now, I can also write just 0.3 times 150. And when I do that, I get 45. And that is the answer. 30% of 150 is 45. This isn't multiple choice, but this is simple. A reminder, this is Desmos Active. Please use Desmos. All right, cool. Halfway done already, less than 10 minutes. Let's go. Okay, question 6. Sarah earns $400 per week and spends 15% of her earnings on transportation. How much does Sarah spend on transportation every week? Now, the hardest part of these problems, where we're given a percent and a value, is determining whether or not this value is the part or the whole. Now, if it's the part, then we have one formula, and if it's the whole, we have another. What I can use is first $400 per week, and then the question here, how much does Sarah spend on transportation every week? Well, I don't know which would be my whole, the $400 or the transportation money. Well, this 15% says her earnings on transportation. Let me do that in a different color. 15% is earnings on transportation. So she doesn't spend all of her money on transportation, which is good. We know that that is what she's looking for, is this part. So we're given our whole. That actually makes our equation a lot easier because we know that our part, which we're going to say is P, our part equals our $400, our whole, right? And this is our whole, times our percent. Now I'm going to write that percent as a decimal, okay? Write that percent as a decimal. This is times our percent. Now I know it says 15%, but I need to make sure that when I write that as a decimal, I don't write 15, I write 0.15. So I end up saying my part is 400 times 0.15. When I times those together, my answer that I get is 60. And since that's an answer option, I'm pretty happy about that. Now, what does this represent? This represents the amount of money she spends on transportation every week. Y'all know I'm doing these during announcements, so you might see some random pauses every once in a while. Like there. Let's go ahead and finish this one up. $60 is our answer. Question 7. Quentin answered 90% of his test questions correctly. Way to go, Quentin, okay? Quentin answered 54 questions correctly. How many questions were on the test? Now, 90% is not 100%. That is still a part. 90% of his questions were answered correctly. 54 questions were answered correctly. So are these part of the same thing? Are these both part, or is this 54 representing the whole test? Well, since it represents the questions answered correctly, and that is our part percent, we know those are connected. So what we're looking for is the total number of questions on the test, and I need to use the formula of whole equals part. Oop, that's not the right letter. I was putting the number in already. Equals part divided by, or fraction bar, percent. Percent. I should just write the percent sign, shouldn't I? Next time. Okay, so my part equals 54 and my percent is 90. So 54 divided by 90%. Now, if I were to do this without converting the decimal, I would actually still be able to find my answer. It just might be in the wrong place value. When I do this here, what I'll get is like 0.6. That's not really good since these aren't great, but it could lead me to see that B is 0.6 times 100. So the real way to do it, however, is to make sure that that percent is written as a decimal. Just know that if you don't do that, your answer might look really similar. 0, oh, that's a point, I promise, 0.9. And what we get is 60. Again, I have done these questions before, so I know the calculator answers. You would be using a calculator. All right, great job. One final thing I'm going to add. We can use logic to eliminate answer A. Sorry about the loud noise. We know that 49 is a bad answer because if he answered 54 questions, there can't be 49 questions that he answered that in total. That doesn't make sense. You can't answer more questions correctly than there are questions. All right, moving on. Question 8 reads, 75 sixth graders chose to watch a movie on the last day of school. That's 25% of the sixth grade class. How many total students are in sixth grade? Now, to me, I see this as a ratio table question immediately. So I'm going to do both methods just to remind you that ratio tables exist, especially when I see 25%. So I know that my percent is here, and then I'm looking for a number. And I know that 25%, let me do that in a different color. I know that 25% of the class is represented by 75 students. Now, what would 100% of the class be? That's what we're asking. What's the total amount, which is 100%? Now, I've got two good options. I can times across by 4, which is the option I'm going to choose since we're most familiar with it. But you might also see that you could times down by 3 as your rows are equal as well. So I'm going to times by 4 here just to show a different way to do it than just using the formulas. Now I know that 25 times 4 is 100, and 75 times 4 will get me 300. So that means there are 300 total students. Awesome, which is C. Now to do it in another way, what I could do is using the formula of my whole equals my part divided by my percent. I'm gonna remember to use the percent sign this time because my hand is cramping up from using a mouse to draw. Divided by percent. Then I can plug in the same values and get the same answer, right? My part was 75. My percent was 0.25 or 25%. And when I divide this on my calculator, I will get 300. Awesome, 2 different ways in just over 2 minutes. Not bad. Next one, just 2 more. All right, question number 9. Jenny has finished 12 of 20 lessons in her piano book. Liam has finished the same percent of lessons from his piano book. His book contains 30 lessons. How many lessons has Liam finished? So here we're actually looking to create equivalent fractions. But the first thing I need to do is calculate the percent of lessons that Jenny finished. So I know that 12 out of 20 is a fraction, right? That is 12 of 20. And I can use that fraction of 12 over 20 to calculate my percent. 12 divided by 20 is 0.6, which is 60%. All right. So what is going to be the equivalent if Liam's book contains 30? So this is for Jenny, right? J for Jenny. And then Liam's is going to be here. I know that he's given the total lessons. This is the total or the whole. All right, that's the whole. And then I actually calculated the value that I need to use for the percent, right? This is my percent for Liam as well. So if I use these values of my whole times my percent, for Liam, I get for the part, there we go, I get 30, which is my whole, times my percent, which is 0.6. See how we have the decimal values of percents used all the time? And again, this is multiplication. Let me put this here, times, and this is a decimal. Okay, 30 times 0.6 will get me my answer, and what this comes out to is 18. Now, what does this 18 represent? It represents how many lessons Liam has finished already. All right, final one. Here we go. All right, final question, and this one's a bit of a doozy. So 45% of a number is n. I'm sorry, if 45% of a number n is 225, what is 74% of n? This is not an easy problem. I would argue that this is one of the hardest problems that we'll see all year. Now, what we need to do is break this up into 2 parts. We first need to find out what n is, and then we need to find out 74% of n. Here, we know 45% of a number is 225. So we're saying the 45% is 225. Thus, this 225, even though it's huge, is our part. So I know that to find a whole, I do my part. Oops, let's actually do this a little bit further to the left here. I do my part, my whole, which I'm representing with a W, equals my part divided by my percent. Now my part is equal to 225, and my percent equals 0.45. Now when I divide this, I get exactly 500. That means my whole here is 500. Okay, that's a lot. Now my second part here is saying, what is 74% of 500? And this is a question where we know we can use, well, how do I know it's 74% of 500? Because n is this number. N is this, right? It is my whole. So 74% of 500 is actually one of the things you can use your calculator for. If you go ahead and access your calculator and do 74 and then press the percent sign and 500, you'll get your answer. However, the other thing you could do is just multiply these. 500 times 0.74 equals 370. Boom. C is our correct answer. All right. Long problem. If you're confused by this one, just remember this is a two-part problem. We can do some of these challenge problems again in class potentially after the CDA if we're feeling it. However, this is definitely a more challenging one. I would suggest working on the first 9 to start off. All right, 22 minutes, not too bad. Good luck to you all on your CDA this Thursday. You're going to do great.